Sup, nerds? I think it actually only might be Nerd because I think Des, you might be the only one here, or Cart, you might be the only one here if you're even still here. What's up? It's nearly been 3 fucking years. I don't even know what we're doing. Oi, we here. Sup? 3 years. I have been doing this. 3 years. On Tuesday, I will have been not this computer because this computer is new, but I will have been turning on my computer, turning on these cameras, and fucking talking to this little tiny box that's right here. 3 years, twice a week. The fuck am I doing with my life? But hey, it's been fun. I've really enjoyed it. It's probably changed me in ways that I have yet to truly understand and probably don't fully appreciate, but I'm okay with that. And it's an adventure, it's an experience, and I'm here for it. And I will continue to be here for it. But I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it. I don't even know what to say about 3 years, doing this. Excuse me while I just, while the world just goes crazy. The void in the back is taking over. It doesn't like that it's, look, it wants more screen time. No, the void is only halfway here today. The void is only halfway here. There we go. That makes that camera look super strange. No. Okay. This, I just want Misfit Gamer Studios in there. There we go. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, 3 fucking years, man. Hecate, what up? Nice to see you. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate it. But yeah, so it'll be 3 years on Tuesday that I've been doing this. And some things happened. Kage went out of town, so it was just going to be me. We were going to do a new pop culture build. We have decided on it. We haven't made an announcement yet. But next Friday, since we're not going to do it today, next Friday, we will be here for a pop culture build right before the subathon. And we're going to do Goku. We're going to do Goku. And I already have it in my head. Barbarian, Monk, Sorcerer. We have Monk for obvious reasons. We have Sorcerer for the cantrips, because that helps with Kai Blasts and other aspects. And then we have Barbarian for Super Saiyan. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Tri-class. It's gonna be for Goku. So next Friday, I was gonna do that tonight. Honestly, I was officially gonna do that tonight, but then I realized how much it was gonna take to research 3 classes and build 3 subclasses, and I'm just like, nah, I'm cool with that. I don't want to do all of that by myself. It would be nice to have a wingman here to like do a little bit of the front loading and help me organize my thoughts and be able to do the research so I don't just shut up for 20 minutes while I'm reading. So yeah, we'll do that next week when I'm not alone. But I still think Goku would be absolutely amazing. We've done Shazam, we've done Alucard, and now we'll do Goku. And those, I just think that'll be absolutely fucking cool, because I don't think it'll be that complicated. I really don't, especially if we do early Goku. And I'm really thinking, unless there's a spell that I'm not immediately coming to mind outside of like Meteor Strike, or I think it's just called Meteor, but outside of something like that, I'm not worried about having a super high level of Sorcerer. I really just want it for something like the Kai Blasts, so we can have something like Firebolt for, doing that. I think there is another cantrip that I was thinking might be good, but we're gonna ignore, bigger things. I would like something akin to the Kamehameha, but I don't know if we're gonna be able to officially get that. I don't think we're gonna get something like the Spirit Bomb, but at least we'll get a Kai Blast. I'm thinking the Monk, not just for the fighting aspect, not just for the fighting style, not just for Flurry of Blows, but more specifically for deflect missiles, because I'm just thinking of all the times they get to deflect the Kai Blast, and now I'm thinking, oh, that's just deflect missiles. That's just absolutely designed for Monk, is that you just hit him and he's just like, ding! No. And then, of course, you need Barbarian there, because Barbarian is just gonna be the excuse to go Super Saiyan. And that would be the perfect flavor for it, right? That would be the perfect skin for that for most DMs. I know I don't like that word, flavor text, but let's face it, that's how most people are gonna look at it. Is it's gonna act like Rage, but it's gonna look like going Super Saiyan. And I think that's phenomenal. I think that would be a perfect 5th edition compilation. of that. So yeah, let me do something real quick. I wanted to post this because it is a 3-year anniversary and everything. I wanted to post this in one of my shared discords, so I have to get the links real quick. So pardon while I get these done. I'm just gonna do this and then we'll start it. I have to also go live on TikTok real quick, but we'll get there in just a second. I need that one, and then I need that one. For my upcoming 3-year anniversary, subathon next Saturday. I'm doing an AMA. I will be live on Twitch, YouTube, and TikTok. So stop by with any questions about me, the stream. Studios. Okay, cool. So I just need that. Actually no, this one's the Twitch one, so I'm gonna do that there. So copy that. Boom. Boom. Oh. There. Just 2 quick little ones. I'm not gonna do anything else. They can go find me. Wait, why is my... Hold on. Why did I get tagged in this? Oh, I didn't... Okay, never mind. I didn't get tagged. Okay, cool. That's all been posted. So there we are. We are live on YouTube. Let me double check YouTube chat just to be 100% sure. Oh, I didn't. Okay, never mind. I didn't get tagged. YouTube chat is live and well. Everything's good. Before I go live on TikTok, I should do a breakdown of how many D&D turns it takes the average Dragon Ball Z character takes doing the soul. Okay, so how many D&D turns it takes for the average DBZ character? How long it takes them doing the Soul Blast? 6 seconds is average turn, so I assume the average time would be up to 1,000. I mean, that's, you know, it's more like, you know, how many punches do they get per round, but then on top of that, how many more rounds does it take for them to complete a sentence? Because that's more like it, right? It's like they get 9 attacks per round, but they only get 1 word every 3 rounds. So it's somewhere along the lines of that, I think. All right, let me make sure everything is good to go for TikTok, and then we will get all set up. All right, cool. Let's find out. And no, that didn't work. Screen adaptation. This is a new screen adaptation tool to make your live more appealing. Yeah, that's fine. I'm right in the center. Oh yeah, that's totally fine. It has my name right there, ish. Has me in there. Yeah. So AMA with Vortex, Dungeons and Dragons content. That's totally fine. Blah, 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 blah. There we go. That you are promoting yourself or your own business. Yes, I am my own brand. Actually, no, I'm not really. Oh wait, hold on. What is this for? Okay, no, but I'm not like selling anything. We're just talking. So go live. Go live. Boom. There we are. Do I have to look at that the whole time? No. I hope I don't. That's kind of annoying, but whatever. Oh, no, I don't want that. Does it really have to show me that? I mean, it's not like it's that big of a deal, but I have this giant like square on my TikTok studio account now that's showing me what people see if they see the preview, and I don't like that. No, turn off mobile preview. Okay, yeah, see, that's what I don't mind what mobile preview looks like, but I don't want it over here. Can I turn it off over here? No, that's not what I want. Jeez. Oh, this is annoying. But hey, you know what? It's TikTok. What do you expect? I rarely ever go live on here. How do I change that? Layers. Ooh. Doesn't look like I'm gonna get rid of it, which is just really unfortunate, TikTok. Why do you have to be? Oh, there we go. Got rid of it. Perfect. Now we're cooking. So yes, now we are live on Twitch, we are live on YouTube, and we are live on TikTok. So let the AMA begin. I will let the questions flow in as they shall, and I will try to be entertaining in the meantime. But if there's anything that you want to know about me as a DM, as an individual, as a content creator, if there's anything you want to know about the brand Misfit Gamer Studios, our history, what we're planning on doing in the future, what we're trying to do right now, if you have any questions on High Point, my setting as a DM, pretty much anything, let's talk about it. It is a 3-year anniversary. So I have been doing this for 3 years now. May 5th, what would it be? May 5th, 2023, I guess, would have been my very first day streaming. And here we are 3 years later, coming up to our 3rd year in a few days. And yeah, I wanted to do an AMA to celebrate that, be able to talk a little bit about the history of the brand, the history of the stream, and the content that we make. And of course, you know, answer any D&D questions that people have. So if you have them out there, if you're interested, let me know in chat. I am available for everyone on every platform at the moment. So just let me know. First, we got Cart from over on Twitch. Question they've been thinking about: transmutation spell. When you transform, it can change your clothes. So if you revert back from the transmuted clothes, you're okay. So wait, hold on. Been thinking about transmutation spell. So when you transform, it can change your clothes. So if you revert back and the transmuted clothes are dirty, are your clothes dirty? Got you. Okay, so the idea being transmutation spell has changed you. You have become dirty, but then you transform back. So in my opinion, you would assume that the dirt on your skin is not gonna like suddenly fall off, right? It doesn't clean you. But there's a lot of different ideas about how magic works, right? When, you know, when the magic dispels what's actually happening. So I would say that it kind of depends on how you treat magic, right? So we're talking about transmutation spell. I would say that if your viewpoint, and I'll actually look it up to see if specifically D&D 5e or even older editions have a more specific explanation, but I don't think they do. I would say that depending on how you view the magic, depending on what it's doing, I could see an argument for both. So I'm going to look it up because transmutation spell. Let's see. What does the transmutation spell actually say? Because you say it changes clothes. Where is it? Oh boy, now I have to figure out what level it is, because I can't find it that easily without knowing what level it is. Do you know off the top of your head, Cart, what level it is? Unless I just click through all of these until I find it. That's transmute rock, that's not transmutation. Did I miss it? Where is it? Let's see. Transmutation spell, all right, so is there a specific one you're thinking of? Because I'm trying to think of which one specifically changes your clothing. So specifically looking through all the transmutation spells, I mean, let's see. I'm just trying to read through them all. Which one would change your clothes? So other than alter self, I think alter self might be the only one as far as I'm seeing here. I mean, there is prestidigitation, which in and of itself has the opportunity to clean you. And man, there are so many transmutation spells. Polymorph also counts. Okay, so we'll have to look at polymorph as well. Okay, so, oh, and then true polymorph. Okay, so starting with true polymorph, you can see within range, different creature, non-magical object shifts into a creature, lasts until the duration, if you maintain the concentration, unwilling creature, blah, 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 creature into creature. If you turn a creature into another type of creature, the new form can take any kind you choose, blah, blah, blah. I don't see that one actually changing clothes. Did alter self specifically change clothes? And see, even alter self specifically talks about only changing your body. So unless we're assuming, so it looks like from what I can tell, none of them specifically call out being able to change your clothes. So I would say that the real difference comes down to, I guess, like how you view the physical change. I'm gonna say that these don't necessarily change your clothes unless I'm just overlooking the verbiage that specifically says it would change what you're wearing. Oh, here we are. Well, creature into object transforms along with whatever the creature is wearing in that form. Creature to creature. So what's interesting is creature to creature doesn't let you change the size, and creature to object does change the clothing. So that would be for true, and that's up to true. That's true polymorph. For regular polymorph, target's gear melds into the new form. The creature can't use otherwise. Okay. If it through or shapeshift into a beast for the duration. So polymorph just shapeshifts you, which means that your gear is gone in the first place. So I would say that for both of those, your gear would remain in the condition it went away in, because technically when it comes to polymorph and true polymorph, your clothing, your gear is in the transformation, so they would be protected by magic. That's what I'm gonna assume on that one. And You can appear as a creature of different size. Your basic shape sounds the same. Though none of your statistics change, you appear as a creature of size, distinguishing characteristics. And yeah, so Alter Self specifically talks about your own characteristics. So yeah, so to easily answer your question, Alter Self wouldn't affect your clothing, but for Polymorph, I would say that because the verbiage states that your clothing's going away and your clothing is being used in the formation of the new body, I would say regardless of how dirty you are, the clothing comes back in the exact same condition it went away in. Same thing as in if you were changed by transmutation and you got cut, your clothing would not have that cut in it because your clothing was not present during the cut. Your clothing was magically in a pocket dimension, essentially is what it is, right? It melds into your body. Because otherwise, then that would have to be the case. Things like any magic that would transform you and your gear would then mean that any physical damage you took, so does your gear. And that doesn't necessarily make sense. So I would say that in those two situations with Polymorph and True Polymorph, your gear is going to be protected by the basis of the spell. Alter Self wouldn't necessarily change anything about your clothes. What's going on, Sarge? How you doing? Nice to see you. Thanks for stopping by. All right, Cart. So theoretically, you could theoretically hide a powerful object on your person indefinitely by True Polymorph. Yes. So in that particular case, I would say yes. If you had a piece of gear that was extremely important, then you use True Polymorph or Polymorph in order to change you into a version of you that would require the consumption of all of the stuff, like all of your gear, into the spell. Then technically, yes, I would say that that would be a valid way to hide something as long as you maintained it. Now, the object doesn't necessarily not exist. So I would also see an argument that depending on the DM, you could make the argument that either it is in a pocket dimension, so it doesn't exist on the material plane, and therefore would be completely hidden. That's option one. I can equally see the argument that while it's in a pocket dimension, the spell does say that it just is transformed with the spell, which means you could make the argument that it still exists here, it's just not physically tangible. And that would be very interesting because let's say that item is being tracked. So the item would show up as in being in the near area, but not necessarily specifically on your person. So I could see both. It really depends on how much you hold to the idea that that would be a pocket dimension where your gear and everything else completely goes away versus whether or not it is there just intangible, right? So I would say that that would be DM specific on how you view what that magic is doing. But yes, it would protect the gear, and that is, in my opinion, a valid way to hide something. But to the extent you could hide it is, in my opinion, completely dependent upon the DM. What's going on, everybody? Thank you all for showing up. I appreciate everybody for being here. It is our 3-year anniversary. Well, 1 year on TikTok. I've only been on TikTok like a year and a half, so it's not quite my 3-year anniversary there, but it is my 3-year anniversary streaming and making content. So thank you for joining me on my AMA today. If you have any questions out there, let me know. We are live on TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube right now. So if you hear me talking to somebody and you didn't see a question, you probably didn't miss it. It's probably just coming from somewhere else. So let me know. If not, hang out. I appreciate your company. And just listen, because we're talking about everything from the brand Misfit Gamer Studios all the way to my my setting of High Point, my viewpoints as a DM, or just who I am. Who is Vortex? Why do I have Vortex on my arm? I don't know. You can ask me that. We could find out. A partial bag of holding. So yeah, that would be another way of kind of looking at it. Obviously, limitations apply because you can't just like. Because here's the thing, you wouldn't be able. Sorry, I'm trying to get my thoughts here because this is an interesting concept I have not seen talked about in the greater D&D sphere. So I'm really curious to see how many people have actually thought about this, right? Because like you're mentioning, kind of a wannabe bag of holding. And technically that's not untrue. Usually a bag of holding is limited to only the amount of weight. So then that begs the question, what is considered something being worn? Because by the nature of the verbiage of those spells, anything that you're wearing, any of your gear, officially gets transformed with you, right? So what's considered gear? Like, at what point does a backpack stop being a backpack and just an object with a strap? Because you can't just go up to a house, right? Wrap it around in rope and then put the rope on like a backpack and be like, the house is my backpack now, and now I polymorph, so I polymorph with the house. Like, you know that you can't do that. But then that begs the question, well, where is that middle ground? Where does that line get drawn? If I can do it with a satchel and I can do it with a backpack, can I do it with a rucksack? Can I do it with a duffel bag? Can I do it with full plate armor? Can I do it with full plate armor and a duffel bag? Could I do it with plate armor, a duffel bag, and a satchel? Could I do it with plate armor, a duffel bag, a satchel, and a bag of holding? Like, the idea becomes, at what point is what you're carrying not considered what you're carrying? Because if it's just purely by the definition of I can wear it and therefore it's on my person, then if it doesn't require you to walk, then you could quite literally overload yourself to the point of you can't move, polymorph, and then everything's on you, right? You would literally be a walking bag of holding. But that's where you have to draw those limits of, while magic normally doesn't have intent and knowledge, the rules as intended that's usually where I lend or I kind of like lean into, is it's rules as intended more than it is rules as written, because you could easily break things if you're just like, well, I'm wearing it, so it says it's consumed, but it's like, it's really not, right? So I would say rules as intended, meaning that the limitation there is you'd still have to be considered carrying it, as in you'd have to be able to physically function with it on you. And if you could physically function, then this spell would take care of it. But if you can't physically function, then it's not considered a wearable object. And that would be my limitation for how far you could exploit using something like polymorph as your own personal bag of holding. Shigaroth, what's going on? Your DM let you pour your Barbarian Path of Giants Elemental Cleaver skills into a dagger and forged 4 rogue. Interesting. I love the idea of applying these new weapon mechanics to other weapons. So the idea that if it makes more sense for your character build to use something like cleave with a dagger, I am 100% okay with that, because I very much appreciate what 5e24 did with weapon modifiers and those extra abilities. But at the same time, I'm all about the creativity, and as long as it makes narrative sense, as long as it makes sense for the character that you build, I am all for something like that. So being able to really get something like cleave into a dagger sounds impressive, and I would love to know like the backstory and how that actually worked. But that's pretty dope. I would let that happen, but again, has to just make sense, right? I'm not the type of DM that would just say, hey, you can just you can have anything, right? Because I don't buy that, right? I'm of the old school mindset that every class should be unique in its own way, and that it needs to be able to shine that way, and not every other class should be able to do that, because then it kind of diminishes the point of making those selections. But there are certain things that you can narratively bend the rules on to make kind of sense. So while I appreciate each weapon having their own special abilities, being able to steal the technique, I think, is still a valid and good idea. The dagger gained an element and had the throw oh, nice. So you were able to do it at range. Did you also get the recall ability on it, or the recall spell? Because I love that for weapons, when you can have ranged weapons and then you either have boomerang or the recall spell on it, so you can just immediately get it back without having to go pick it up. That would just be absolutely devastating for a thrown dagger with cleave. Just be, that would just basically be like Batman. Just Batman's battering, just going through enemies and then coming back. Imagine smuggling a ring of polymorph, caster sneaking into goods and artifacts in forbidden places. I mean, and that's the thing. These are the things that I like to think about in terms of when I'm building High Point and I want to think about, well, if I have an organization that's gonna do smuggling, right? You can think about all the traditional ways of smuggling, but at some point in a realm of fantasy, right? In a realm of magic where people can basically cast spells that scry miles away, how do you really smuggle at certain levels? Like, there's going to be a point at which you would assume all of that's going to just be stopped because they can just do like a zone of truth and whatnot. But that's where you have to get really, really creative. And I like the idea of being able to use things like polymorph for smuggling purposes, really bending the rules of what it was intended to do, but it's still within the realm of what the spell is intended to do, right? Like it wasn't intended for stealing, but the way it was intended to be used can be used for smuggling, if that makes more sense. Path of the Giant gave the barbarian the element and the return throw. Okay, so it was the return throw. That nice. I didn't know that Path of the Giant did that. That's kind of dope. I have not looked into all of the barbarian paths that deeply before, but that is really cool. I would use the crap out of that ability. All right, so what's our next question? Who wants to dive into our next AMA question? I am up for the rest of the night, at least, to see what we are going to be discussing. Last time I was live, I think about like a month ago, we did specifically a High Point Histories AMA, where I specifically wanted to focus on like the lore and the history of High Point. But I did want to expand this one a little bit more to just kind of everything, because I've had a lot of good content engagement recently, especially over on TikTok, and y'all have been really, really great in the community with just really engaging with the content and giving some really good ideas out there. So I wanted to go live again on TikTok and give people that kind of opportunity, because I feel like I've been starting to grow a pretty decent community, and I want to expand upon that. And I've never really watched or gotten into TikTok lives before, so I don't really know what it's all about. I don't know really how the expectation's supposed to be, but hey, you know what? We're here, we're trying it out, and I got a couple of you here, so I appreciate you all very much so. But let me know if you have any questions about me, my realm, my the brand, whatever, you know, we're here. What's going on, Hecate? How are the plans for the subathon going? They are going pretty well. So Friday, right before the subathon, we will do the pop culture build for Goku. So I'm really excited about that, because I know that it's going to be the tri-class. I know that he's going to be a barbarian, monk, sorcerer, but we'll kind of decide the specifics on Friday. And because I even thought about saving that for Saturday, but I really liked Kage's plan of kind of making Saturday a bit of a mixture of things that we've done. So, you know, we might start out with just chatting and getting, you know, wait until everybody kind of shows up, and then we'll move on to either building something, either you know, a pop culture build, a subclass. Maybe we'll do some spells. We'll just kind of do our normal creation thing. We might throw in a review, like either just a random review from one of the ones that are recently submitted, or we might try to find something online that somebody suggests. And other than that, we are probably going to go with the same type of subathon content as before. So we'll have like some spicy stuff, some sour stuff. I'll have the dye for my hair again, so y'all can make me dye my hair. And then we got a couple other specialty secret Easter egg stuff that we're going to throw in for the subathon. So if you want to know what that's all about, you're going to have to show up next Saturday. I saw that we have another question over in TikTok. Oh no, not another question. But we do have I have a cleric warlock I want to try, where his mom is his god and his dad is the patron. Ooh. Ooh, that's spicy. I like that. Ooh. So I'm curious if you already have ideas for that. That could be really interesting depending on how lore intensive you want that idea. Oh, like I could go so many different ways with that. Like in one way, you could go really nice and just be more of a, his parents are just very powerful entities, and and so he just, you know, naturally followed them, but they had to give them their power in different ways. So I'm totally down for that. But then there's part of me where I almost like, you could make it to where your father, this eldritch deity, basically made a deal with your mother where she, as a goddess, needed something to happen, and she, you know, in order to do it best, she would need like a firstborn, or she would need like a mortal child in order to accomplish it. So this deity makes a deal that, you know, they'll provide the child, but the child must, you know, succeed in doing something for the deity, for the entity. So they basically have a child, but the child becomes both a, you know, cleric and a warlock due to the deal. That there's so many like different pathways you could do. So I'm really curious if you've like kind of figured out why that happened, because that would be fun. I think that would be a whole fantastic campaign to run for somebody as their entire like character arc. You have both trying to persuade him to do good. Oh, okay, so it is like a good or evil. It's like devil, like a devil angel on the shoulder kind of thing. That's interesting. And to level up, you roll even Claire. Oh, so they don't get to choose their level up. They have to roll. Interesting. That I could legit see that. I could absolutely see that. That's gonna get me thinking. That's gonna get me thinking. I like that. I can already tell over on my my TikTok peeps are probably taking that information. They're writing that down like, huh, I want to try that. I've never thought about making someone roll to figure out what their level up was going to be, though. That's fascinating. Is that particular to the TTRPG you play, or the setting, or is that a personal like house rule? Because I'm really interested. I've never heard of that before, where you have to roll to figure out which one you're going to do in terms of your subclass, or you know, your multi-class. Here, look at this. I'm on the AMA and I'm asking y'all questions. How is that working? How is that working? It's not supposed to work that way. Y'all are supposed to ask me questions. I'm the special one here. Pay attention to me. Nah, it's fine. It's all in good fun. I don't really care. What we care about is if y'all are enjoying yourselves. And we care about D&D content. We want to talk about D&D content. That's exactly how it is. I did that because he was constantly torn between good and evil. Okay, so the role isn't so much against the character's choice. The role is so the player kind of lets the character themselves kind of decide. I like that. I had one of my very first characters was not that particular in terms of like when it leveled up, but it did have a morality system, we'll say, that was based on a die roll. And at major turning points, the die would decide which alignment would have to dictate their next choices. So yeah, not the easiest character to play, but I dig it. I like the variation of it. Both parents want them to be more on their alignment. Of course they do. I like that though. I'm really curious. Did you write in the lore about what happened, like how the parents got to this stage? Or are you just gonna let that just kind of be part of whatever backstory gets created? Because that sounds kind of cool. I like that. Both parents trying to fight for your attention, basically. What's going on, Grog? How you doing? Nice to see you. Yeah, no, that's cool. I like it. I like the idea of having parents trying to tear you one way or the other. All right. So what is our next question? Just gonna be popping in for a hot minute. Well, I appreciate you stopping by. I really do. Thank you so much. It's kind of a 3-year anniversary, 1.5 years on TikTok, but 3 years as a content creator. So I'm doing an AMA for that. It's technically Tuesdays, the anniversary. And I'm doing a subathon on Twitch next Saturday. So yeah, kind of just having a chill Friday, talking to people, answering questions. But I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you so much. All right, what we got, Cart? You know what happens okay, wait. So what happens to the gear you carried merges into your new form, and becomes part of the beast form and is not accessible or usable. So spider inflation plus crates of alchemist fire, and then boom, yeah. Like again, depending upon what limits you would instill on what is considered carryable, would definitely put you in a unique position to be able to shift these things into your polymorph form, take them somewhere, and then get them back. But I am really curious. Again, I would be most curious, and actually I might post this as in a short this coming week on TikTok, because I'm really curious how many DMs out there, how they would call that, right? Like, what would be the limit in terms of using polymorph, not only to transition and move things in a secretive manner, but I'm actually more curious, how would most DMs consider those things to be traceable, right? Like, in that form, just like what we were talking about a little bit ago, when polymorphed and those items became part of your form, are they in a pocket dimension that is untraceable within the Primaterial plane? Or are they still technically on you, just inaccessible and immaterial, right? They're just not tangible, but they are still there within the Primaterial plane. Because again, that would really depend upon whether or not, if you wanted to sneak in a magical item, would that item be detectable through detect magic, right? They would know that you're polymorphed, but would they be able to know that you're polymorphed with things? So I'm really curious how most would decide how that works, because I don't think that's something most players think about when taking polymorph spells, is what they can benefit from it, because usually it's hiding your identity, or kind of like with Alter Self, it's getting some extra ability out of it. But not a lot of people think about the fact that those items are no longer tangible, which means that what would normally look, intimidating is now non-existent. Detect magic would assume that you would see the order of magic around them, but you would normally always see the magic, right? So that's why I'm curious if there was a way to figure out if there was like a magic weapon, right? Would that come through the polymorph, or would you just know there's the single spell? I think for the most part, like I said before, I think it's a very valid way, and I think it would overcome most issues with standard smuggling. I really do think that would be a very valid use of smuggling. Let's see. Think about both disguise is corrupt. Save someone of opposite alignment. Oh, gotcha. Okay. So they were both kind of like spies, but ended up falling for the person that they were buddying up with on the other side. Okay. And then once they discovered the other identity, gotcha. So I like that. I don't think that is. I think that's a great narrative. I think that that's a very usable narrative. I think you should run with that for sure. All right. Oof, my drink is almost out, y'all. I'm running low. And we've barely been on for an hour. But it's nice. We've been getting some questions, some good questions. I like it. Anybody got anything else? Oh, got nothing over on YouTube. Nobody's over on YouTube. Shame. For shame, YouTube. So for new players, what classes do I recommend? I'm assuming this is for 5e. So it's a kind of a complicated question, because I really don't think that there's no like clear-cut answer, right? This isn't like a one size fits all where, oh, everybody will be happy with this. But there are a couple aspects that I would lean someone towards, right? So when it comes to 5e specifically, like if someone is interested in dabbling in magic, or in general interested in spellcasting, I would probably point them to be a warlock, mainly because of the versatility in storytelling and in combat. Because for the most part, without having a real better, like without an easier way to say this, unless you're a real D&D nerd, being a wizard kind of sucks in a lot of ways. It's boring, it's not very entertaining, and it's very difficult to roleplay in a meaningful way for new players. I think that if you are really into D&D lore, or really into roleplay, or just really into like understanding mechanics and the book, then a wizard is fine. But for the most part, if you're a brand new player and magic interests you, I think most people will gravitate well into warlock, because it's just enough magic to dabble and be really creative and have fun, but you're also not a glass cannon to the point to where you feel like you're just always sitting back waiting. Now, if you want to be more of the fighter type, I would say personally go monk or barbarian. If you want to be more of the in-your-face fighter with some speed, go monk instead of something like rogue or fighter, because monk is a lot of fun. There's a lot more interesting subclasses, and I think, again, the roleplay feeds into the average person's idea of what D&D roleplay will be. The other ones, I think the roleplay runs stale for new players, because most people play paladins and fighters in a manner in which that over time becomes less enjoyable to try to keep up that motif. Whereas with the monk, I feel people can play a lot more casually. And outside of that, so I would say warlock and monk would be two of my top ones for brand new players. I think those are some great introductory ones. Like, I started out with a rogue, but I just don't think in 5e a rogue is as... it just doesn't feel as rewarding to play. So I would say, I would say my top two, if you're interested in magic, go warlock. If you're mostly interested in fighting, go monk. However, the secondary fighter to monk is if you want to be more of the if you want to be more tanky, to where you're not always the main center of attention when fighting, but you do want to do a lot of damage, I would choose barbarian over paladin. Simply just because I feel that, again, paladin is kind of like the wizard in the sense that paladins work best when you have someone who is kind of a nerd and kind of a geek with D&D and roleplay and mechanics. I feel that the barbarian is a lot more approachable and doesn't require as much fundamental understanding, but can still be creatively used by brand new players. So those would be my top three: warlock, monk, barbarian, and then everything else from there. Once you understand your specialties and what you really want out of the game, I would say then experiment beyond that. But those would be my first choices, depending on your interests, specifically for 5e. There are plenty of other subclasses that are in classes that I would suggest for other editions, but 5e, those are my three. Working with the new DM, some new players in the first campaign lasted 5 sessions before a TPK. Oof. I mean, some DMs just don't know how to balance. And then again, it depends on the game that everybody wants to play. Some people want to play a superhero sim. Some people want to play a die-hard D&D game, and some people want to play a Souls-like. It really kind of depends on what level of difficulty and how much you're willing to invest in every iteration, right? Because some people are so invested that they don't want to keep creating a character every 5 gaming sessions, but other people don't care. Other people have 5 characters they're waiting to use. So yeah, it just depends on how people want to work it. People picking classes they didn't understand is huge. Like if you really not, again, like I said, for new players, I would go with things that are less technical and a lot more roleplay friendly, but also a lot more generalization friendly. Just because I don't think most people really understand what they are. See, it's not that they don't understand how to do it, it's they don't understand what they're going to get from it, right? Choosing to play a sorcerer, if you really don't understand what you're going to get from that, it's going to be really not fun to play, especially if you're like, oh, I want to do magic and I want to throw spells around, and then you choose something like a sorcerer and you're just like, this isn't that fun. It's like, well, because you didn't want to be a sorcerer, right? Like you didn't understand what the sorcerer was going to do for you. What's going on, Ninja Buddy? Nice to see you. Let's see. But yeah, I would definitely say picking classes that you don't understand when you're brand new. Obviously, most classes you don't understand, but if you don't understand the complexity and the mechanical understanding, there are some classes that are just less fun to play without it. Oh yeah, attack. Yeah. See, and that's the problem and this is why I don't suggest fighter. It's because many people fall into that mindset of, oh, fighters are aggressive. Fighters just want to literally punch everything. And that's not necessarily how you want to play that. But when you have a new player who really doesn't know what they're getting out of it, they're going to run into situations like that where they're just going to be like, oh, it must be a bad guy. Punch him in the face. I miss something over here from Cart. Do I personally let my groups keep their intel? Oh, you're talking about from the stat change. It depends on how they get changed. I usually go by default with what like the spell information says. So if it says that they keep all of their like normal awareness, then yeah, they would keep all their normal awareness. I don't remember off the top of my head. I know I just was looking at it, but I don't remember True Polymorph's definition on whether or not you keep your mental stats or not. Spell Sniper feat with movement of monk go crazy literally to reposition like an expert sniper. That would be dope. Yeah, Spell Sniper with movement. That's awesome. Get a bit of a rogue to hide, and now you're in danger. Yeah, that would be cool. Being able to move around like a sniper, hide like a sniper, all from a distance. That would be great. Hecate, what is my favorite class lore-wise? Psionic. Hands down the Psionicist. That is and always will be, and pretty much always has been since I was introduced to it. The Psionic class from AD&D 2nd edition is by far the best class ever. Just period. It is the most versatile, the most creative, and the most unique experience that you can have in any class that I have ever seen in any edition. So just no question. Now, if we're only talking about 5th edition and just basic 5th edition lore, because 5th edition doesn't have lore, really. Honestly, it's probably either going to be the monk or a rogue, just because they have some of the more interesting subclass sources. Like, in terms of their lore sources, those two, I would say, have some of my favorites that I could really get into. Most of the other ones are generic and boring. Like, we've talked about this before, where 90% of the warlock subclasses just don't sound appealing because they're really not interesting in terms of lore, right? So, yeah. But in all of my editions, I will always love the Psionicist. That will always be my favorite number 1 class ever. I even did, if you guys want to check it out, I even did, it's in our VOD channel on YouTube. I read through, Kage and I actually did like a 5-episode series where we read through the entire Psionicist handbook. We sat down, I think it took us like 3 or 4 streams, and we read through every page back to cover of the Psionicist handbook. So if you were interested and want to know anything about the Psionicist, you can learn it all there, because we read everything, talked about it, broke it down. Absolutely amazing. It was fucking gold. What's my favorite magic item? Yours is the Rod of Lordly Might. See, here's the downside with magic items is I don't know an absolute metric ton of the D&D standard magical items. So I would say, honestly, I don't care how cliche it may sound, it's kind of a tie in terms of D&D, especially 5th edition lore that most people know of. It's probably a tie between the Rod of Wonder or the Deck of Many Things. Mainly just purely based off the chaos, but also because it's one of the few times 5th edition has truly shown a, in my opinion, proper measure of balance, where the positive side is equally balanced with negatives. Because more often than not, D&D balances it with, I'm going to give you some positives, or I'm going to give you one big positive. Instead of old D&D that used to say, well, for every positive, you're going to get an equal negative. And those two magical items, in my opinion, have been the closest to a more traditional D&D magical item, where they balance what could happen with what you hope to happen. So I know that those are very common items. Again, I'm not extremely knowledgeable on some of the newer lore items and just in general all of the named items, but those two stand out as ones that I've always appreciated because they feel balanced with both good and bad outcomes. Card says that they personally prefer wild magic wizards. For the lore wise, yeah, wild magic wizards are pretty cool. I wish 5th edition would do more with wild magic. I really wish that it would really explore it more, but I feel like they just kind of threw it out there as a, hey, some people want a little bit extra randomness, but we don't want to build a whole thing on it. So here, wild magic table. Woo! It's, to me, it is bare minimum effort. Great idea, bare minimum effort. Slinger and Rifts is pretty cool. Psychic class, granted that isn't your area per se. It's not, yeah, I really need to dive into Rifts. Like, I keep hearing about it from you and Grog a lot, and I really want to dive in and kind of figure it out a little bit more. But it is just one of those things where, again, it's kind of like the TikTok I made a while back where I said that TTRPG community is the perfect analogy to the neurodivergent community, right? It really does have the perfect mix of has to be by the book. I want to try everything. I only want to try the things I know. And I'm really the last one in that common series where I want to try it all, but I want to do so from my safe space. Like, I love Forgotten Realms in terms of its baseline foundational lore. I love the idea of crystal spheres. I love the idea in general of how the power structure works. And I love a lot of the fundamental AD&D features that come with the baseline TTRPG game. But just like with 2nd edition, I didn't want to buy every 2nd edition book because that's a level of dedication I don't necessarily have or want. But I also want to tell a story in a way that makes the story fluid. I don't want to force the story down a certain path because the mechanics don't allow it. But I also don't want mechanics that are just fully fly by the seat of my pants and nothing matters, right? So to find that good balance is to craft the world and the story that I want to tell, find the foundation, which I found in AD&D 2nd edition, but grow it from there. Wherever the world needed something better than AD&D offered, I found something that had a better mechanic, and applied that mechanic in a way that better told my story, but also did not fundamentally change how the expectation of the game should operate, right? And that's where I feel like a lot of people have a problem developing their own ideas in terms of how to expand what game they enjoy into other areas, because there is a way where you can modify aspects of different games to fit you. And I don't mean this as in a you have to replace every rule with something else, but sometimes the game you like and the story you're telling just doesn't have a simple mechanic for the one thing you need it to do to push the story along. And that's where I look for inspiration from other mechanics to be like, hey, I just need to push my story along in this one area that D&D doesn't cover. Why strip the story and strip all of the work we've done to learn a new mechanic, to learn an entirely new system when all I need is this obstacle overcome, and then we move on, right? So that's kind of where I'm at with my home brewing in terms of it is I still consider High Point very fundamentally 2nd edition AD&D, but AD&D doesn't solve everything. So I do look for inspiration elsewhere, but to me, it's not worth the time and effort to scrap everything and have all my players restart new characters and me try to retell a new story when I have 10, 13 years at this point invested in a story that I also have characters and players who have been in for 10 years. Like, for none of us want to scrap everything we've done just because D&D doesn't do that one thing that we need it to do right now in this one part of this one story in this one giant place, right? And that's where I feel like it's hard sometimes to express to people why I'm so not pro homebrewing, but just very pro narrative over mechanic, because there's a point at which the enjoyment of the game is the game that you've built, the story that you've built, the narrative that you built, right? And to scrap it all just because you want to go try a new mechanic is not something that appeals to me. But I also don't want to just assume that I have the best idea of how to do everything, right? Which is why I don't promote people doing it my way. High Point was never meant to be publicized, right? It was never meant to be a publication. It's the way that me and my friends play, the way we tell our story, and how we fill in the gaps that D&D doesn't fit, right? But yeah, Rifts is one of those ones I need to look into more, because I feel like from the things I've heard, Rifts is very similar to how I run High Point, and I'm sure that there's a lot of aspects and a lot of mechanics that Rifts has that are probably eerily similar, if not identical, to some of the things that I've created. And it would be kind of funny if Rifts and I are as equal as I think we might be in some of our rule sets, which would be great, because then Rifts might be able to actually help me expand and finalize some of the ideas that I don't quite have perfectly figured out. So we'll see. Oh, you just got a new your own deck of many things. Be careful. Be careful. Only pull one card. Don't be greedy. Don't be greedy. Don't pull more. I'm telling you. Norris Play, what's going on? How you doing? Thanks for stopping by. Makes perfect sense. I'm glad you understand, because it's on TikTok sometimes when you only, do 15-second videos, it's really hard to express to people what High Point really is. And it's funny, if you've been with me, I think you've been with me quite a while on TikTok, and I don't know if it's apparent how much my content and the way that I approach my content has changed, not just to be a better TikTok creator, but also just to better explain myself. I mean, I've even gone to the point to where it's like I no longer call High Point D&D simply because I recognize that High Point is in and of itself its own thing. I know that for me, my comfort zone is High Point. High Point is the story, it's the setting, it's the location, it's the universe, whatever you want to call it, right? I call it a crystal sphere because I really liked how Forgotten Realms described the crystal sphere and the phlogiston. And when you really look into the lore of it, and I mean, I've done this before on stream, but fuck it, it's an AMA. Let's talk about it right now. One of the reasons why I'm really interested in the crystal sphere is A, it's just a cool concept, and it's what got us spell jamming and all these other cool concepts. But when you look into the lore about when they created crystal spheres and the phlogiston, the deep lore, like the things that they would make mention of but not like go into detail, is the theories, right? They said that there were explorers who have gone out and mapped the phlogiston, which is why we know what different crystal spheres are, which is why we know where different areas are. And when you look at that, they say that there are people that have gotten lost and that have theorized that the phlogiston is endless and that the crystal spheres just keep on appearing the further that you go. I mean, it's in the lore that when it was mapped, there's basically just a fucking highway that goes on infinitely, and there's just crystal spheres that have yet to be discovered. And I took that as an idea of, this is the creator of D&D, right? These are the creators that said, hey, look, we're a bunch of group of friends and we were telling this story and we wanted to codify some of our rules. And the way I interpret their idea of crystal spheres is when one of them decided to DM, they made Torrent. That was the name of their location. And when another one did it, they were like, well, I don't want to do it in your world, so I'm going to make Greyhawk. And so when they compiled all of these ideas, they have Dark Sun and Greyhawk and Torrent, and you do or Torel, sorry, and you have all of these locations, and then you find out all of them are their own crystal spheres in this ever-flowing phlogiston, this ever-expanding infinite phlogiston of infinite, potentially infinite crystal spheres that were created by the ancients to protect these locations. And it just kind of dawned on me, I'm like, so that basically means that from their point of view, D&D was never about following their storyline. It was about the idea that their storyline existed in their crystal sphere. And when you go to different crystal spheres, different gods exist. Your gods do not have power there. Your gods only have power in their crystal spheres. These crystal spheres had different physics, different spells, different economies. And when you expand that idea to, they basically told you these are endless. What that told me is every single person out there that took these booklets and took these rule sets and created a storyline is just another crystal sphere in the ever expanding phlogiston that is everything that we've created. Like, to me, they created the phlogiston to basically be the TTRPG space, and every crystal sphere was your version of how you wanted to play. You could go and grab a module and go play in Dark Sun or go play in the crystal sphere of Greyhawk. But when you finally wanted to make your own rules and your own gods and your own people and your own NPCs, that, in my opinion, was the creation of your own crystal sphere, or the discovery of your own crystal sphere. And that's the inspiration that I took to create High Point. High Point is its own crystal sphere out in the phlogiston somewhere. I did an entire stream on the Cataclysm, the almost universe ending thing that caused Zenith to find High Point in the first place. Escape the crystal sphere he was in and find the crystal sphere now that he is now god of. And I loved that, mainly because it was a great way for me to build my own story off of, but it's that idea of I can accept anyone and everyone's version of D&D because I just look at it as you are your own crystal sphere, right? I can go, and if I want to play hardcore by the book, I'm just looking at it as I walk into that crystal sphere and now I'm under those rule sets. And that's what I really appreciated about like that old school mindset is my crystal sphere is fundamentally everything that is D&D. You can expect 90% of it to act like second edition. There is just going to be things that are in there that aren't familiar, mainly because I'm just trying to fill the gaps that either D&D didn't fill properly or didn't fill at all. And again, it's not about, oh, D&D is the best system and I would never play anything else because everything else sucks. No, it's just that I personally dedicated so much time and effort into building my story and playing D&D for years that it just stopped being worth it to give up everything I know and all of the things that I'm comfortable with and all of the things that make sense to me. It never made sense to give that all up to be like, okay, let me learn from scratch how to build a character. Let me learn from scratch how attacking works. Let me learn from scratch how magic works and how rolls work and what every die does. That is not fun for me, and it is not something I look forward to, because at the end of the day, I just want to sit here and think about High Point. I want to think about the deities and what they're doing and how they're trying to get control over each other, and I'm wondering what my players are going to do. I don't want to go play in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles universe, right? If I want something influenced by that, I don't mind having an influence because that's fun, right? Pop culture influences are great in D&D, but I don't want to go learn a whole other thing just so I could specifically swing the sword, like they would, right? I don't want to specifically change my entire game just so I can go fight Shredder. I don't want to do that, right? It's more of, if you do something better than I do or in a way that I don't have rules for, then I want to learn your rules. But I don't need to know how you do everything else. I just want to figure out how I can take that piece and take it over and apply it to my story and do it in a way that doesn't disrupt how my current my current rule sets work. Because I've heard this in the past where people say, oh, well, you can't do that to this game because it would break the game. Like, it would just break the mechanics if you change these rules. And it's like, to me, if you are so reliant on the rules that by changing them it breaks the game, either the game is fundamentally unstable or you're too involved in, if it doesn't work, I'm just confused because I don't know how it works. And that's fine. But to say that it can't be done, I don't believe that. I don't think that every game is so individual and unique that you couldn't take the inspiration for how they do something and find a way to do it in your game, right? Like in High Point, lightsabers exist. They aren't lightsabers as they exist in Star Wars, but the concept of a sword that works and operates in the same manner does exist, using all of the fundamentals that D&D has given me, right? And that's what I mean. I don't make it and just say, oh, there's a Star Wars lightsaber. It exists exactly like it does in the lightsaber universe, even though D&D doesn't have that. I don't do that because that's lazy and difficult, right? It doesn't make any sense. But to say someone wants to play that, well, I could scrap everything I know and start a brand new game. We could all learn how to create Star Wars characters, and I could learn how to run a Star Wars TTRPG and relearn all the Star Wars lore. Or I could figure out that what they really want is that type of weapon and that type of fighting style, and I can apply that to to making a group of people in High Point that are very similar to Jedi, and have created a weapon using all of the aspects that D&D has given us. I mean, there's magic gems, there's magic, there's all sorts of things that could, artificers could use to make a very similar sword. I would find it more entertaining to do that than to drop everything and being like, okay, let's go play Star Wars this time. It's like, I like the Star Wars universe. I like the stories. I like the movies. I don't necessarily want to relearn how to play Star Wars just for a couple gaming sessions because one person wanted to use a lightsaber for it. It's not my level of enjoyment. So yeah, that's a little bit of backstory. A little bit of backstory of how I created High Point over the years is it's cherry picking things that I needed, but doing so in a way that made everything flow. So it's not like, oh yeah, we're just going to randomly ignore these rules because these rules apply. It's, well, if those rules apply, how do they not affect these rules? It's a juggling act. Going back over to Twitch, also about homebrew. So Cart has a homebrew magic finger trap. It's a very rare. It swaps your highest stat with your lowest stat for 1 hour, once a day. It started out just for a workaround for your intelligence wizard in the group who didn't want to level into barbarian. So 19 intelligence being swapped and turned into a strength, vice versa. Oh, interesting. Actually, I kind of dig that as like an object like that, like a cursed object that does that. Sounds pretty fucking awesome, actually. I mean, any kind of magic item that does that, even like a pair of rings where the two people that wear them, they swap like, their highest and lowest stats could be interesting, or something similar to that. That's fascinating. I really like the idea of that magic finger trap. I would absolutely do that. All right. What else do we got, y'all? Come up to about an hour and a half. I'm down to go up to like 2 hours if we're still getting the questions coming in. I honestly don't. I'm trying to think of like, what can I talk about to do things in the meantime. How do I keep y'all entertained? But it's all right. If we don't keep it entertaining, then that's fine. I can't do much if I'm not entertaining. But I do want to answer any questions that anybody has. Tell them to pull 12 cards. They're not watching anymore, unfortunately. It looks like they bounced a while back. But hey, you know what? They got their first deck of many things. We'll see if they have some good luck with it. Oh, you had a question, Hecate? My apologies. Do you ever throw a monster at your players, but it has a mutation from nature that makes it different from the original base one? All the fucking time. All the time. In fact, it is very rare that I throw standard by the book monsters at my players. I did that recently for Vixie. She was doing some level up stuff, so she and her in-game dad went out and did some hunting and actually got some traditional, because I mean she hasn't had like OG D&D combat for a while, so we did some really old school. I took out my old monster manual and from the book just straight out used the monsters from there. But more often than not, I modify what I throw at them based on what makes sense. And what I mean by that is, like, I don't pre-plan a lot of my encounters, because if you're inside town and you're outside, and right outside town's a farm area, and then right outside that is a river, and then right beyond that is a cliffside, depending on where the encounter happens is going to dictate where or what you guys encounter, right, for my players. And this idea that I'm going to plan it out doesn't let their choices matter. Like, I am very much both a player as a player and as a DM. I am very, very much someone who appreciates and enjoys the fact that my choices and my decisions matter. I can't stand playing games where it doesn't matter if I'm nice to this person or mean to this person. It doesn't matter whether I kill them or let them live. The story will progress regardless. And I don't like that. So for my players, for me to pre-plan an encounter means that it doesn't actually matter what they're going to do. So if they're in town and they pick a fight with the town guards, that's a completely different encounter than if they pick a fight, with that random shady guy that's in the alleyway, versus whether they leave town and they go harass some of the farmers, or whether they get to the river and then they roll for a random encounter, or they try to sleep when they get into the mountains, and then they have to deal with whatever lives out there. Like, for me, the encounter should always be based on where and what they're doing, but the modifications I make is for two things. One, I just like having things change up a little bit, so depending on where they are and like the lore of the area that they're in, sometimes that will modify it. And then other times it's also to help modify the situation for the fight, right? Because if you're dealing with like 10th level fighters, they're gonna deal with regular wolves, normally, right? They're gonna deal with regular wolves like no problem. But if they're in an area, you don't want to throw something at them that, like, to me, I don't want to throw something at my players that just would not exist, that would not make sense for them to run into. So for me, it has to make sense. But if you're in a place where you're gonna run into wolves and you're just so overpowered that wolves don't make sense unless I throw 100 at you, then yeah, I'm gonna modify them in some way. Maybe these ones will be extra aggressive. Maybe these will be extra intelligent. Maybe they'll just be dire wolves. But I really like making certain modifications to either enhance the story, to make the location that they're in feel more unique and local. And then other times it's also due to plot points, right? Sometimes it's also like hey, here's a creature that you should know, but for reasons that are yet you don't understand, it has this weird variance. So sometimes it's for the story, but a lot of the times it's just to represent the fact that you are now in a new place. You are now different, and this isn't what you expect. So yeah. Yes, I do modify them for their standards, and I try not to do it to the point to where like, oh my gosh, this is like something you've never seen before. But sometimes I'll give it like a different attack or a different ability, just so again it makes more sense based on where you encountered it. Oh, perfect. Exactly. Good example, Cart, making like a race of owlbears that are blind because they were raised in magical darkness. Exactly. Shit like that I do all the time. I will make their personalities change. I will change their physical features depending on where they are in the world and what's around them. For exactly that reason. It's just to make the world feel more lived in, and to make everything you encounter feel less like a random encounter and more like, oh, I expect to see this here. I would expect to run into this, and all of this makes perfect sense, right? Let's say you're in a burned down forest that's near a volcano. Finding black salamander is something that I would do, where you might get overrun by like salamander or something, and it's hard to hit them because they're all camouflaged. Stuff like that to me makes sense, because you want to make each and every location feel like it is reacting to whatever it is the players are seeing. Yeah, I love doing things like that, Cart, to really like entice my players and get them interested in the story and what they're doing. It's fascinating to see what they'll do with those pieces of information. But I for me, when I say like I'm all about the story, it's not that I'm about the story in the sense that the story trumps mechanics and the story and trumps rules. Like, I'm not those kind of DMs where I'll fudge, HP, or I'll, break the rules just because it sounds better. But I am very much, everything should matter. You know what I mean? Like, how you treat NPCs should matter. I'm not a big fan of, I could call this NPC, a jackass, and they'll still give me the location, right? Like, no, I don't like the idea that it's just going to happen because it has to happen, because it's expected to happen. I want my players to understand that everything they do matters. And at the same time, that also means that there's always another way, right? Like, if there's an NPC that has the information you need, and it has been made sure 100%, this is the only NPC that has this information. There is no other NPC you can talk to get this information. My players know that that is not a simple, oh, that's just a piece of lore knowledge, woo. No, they understand that's a warning. When I say this, when I can guarantee them this is the only person in this entire game you can get this info from, That's not like just a storytelling narrative, oh, spooky. No, that is a warning. Do not fuck up that conversation. Because what I'm telling you is you only are going to get the chance to get this information from this person. And if you can't, fucking sucks to be you, right? And that's my thing is I am so much more interested in those situations because my players also know that there are two potential outcomes because of this, right? Either that means that there's another way to get the information, just not another NPC, which is 90% of the time it, right? 90% of the time, I would say that my players always have another option. But there is about 10% of the time where it's made obvious, this is your only chance. This is the only thing. And if you fuck it up, you fuck it up. And this is where I really feel, this is one of those things that I feel like does separate me from other DMs. I feel like one of the things that I can confidently say separates me from the standard average DM is that hot take, am willing to basically soft lock characters or hard lock them, meaning that 90% of the time, there's always another way. If you can't figure out how to solve the puzzle, there's another solution. If you can't get the information, there's always something else. But about 10% of the time, there might be a door that only has one key. And if that key is gone, that door is sealed forever. Period. End of story, no more. Now, I also don't believe in the concept that plot lines are locked out, right? Like, if you wanted a certain thing and there's only one way to get it and you fucked it up, that thing's gone forever. But in a world like High Point where the goals are player chosen, you just choose another goal, right? But to me, there are absolutely okay times where there is only one solution, and if the players don't get it, they don't get it. That, I think, separates me from a lot of DMs, because I think a lot of DMs are very uncomfortable with that idea. I think a lot of people misunderstand this, meaning that so they just can't finish the game, they just can't win, you just won't let them progress. And it's like, no, that's not what I said. But if you want something, if you choose to do something that you know has a challenge to fail, and you fail, I follow through with that consequence. As a DM, I follow through with saying that you lost that opportunity. You don't get it. You know, if there's an NPC that has information for you and you kill and or let that NPC die, that information's gone. Sorry. Now, in that situation, could you maybe, you know, like speak with dead? Sure, there's other things that you could do. But at the end of the day, that NPC was the person that held the information, right? So I don't mind doing that. I don't mind making a world that has those kind of consequences, but it's also because I don't have a linear world. There is no linear choice ever in High Point. If you decide you're going to go save that princess, that's your choice. That quest line ends when you decide for it to. You could be on the other side of the door, ready to unlock it and free the princess, and just decide, you know what? Let her stay locked up, and then you can walk away. That is something you can do in High Point. And it's not like a video game where you'll just come back 15 sessions later and then finish the quest. No, if you left her locked up, the world's going to progress. She's going to continue being locked up. She might die, but that's just it, right? It's not like the world doesn't progress. I let my player, every choice my players make, every time they talk to somebody, every NPC they interact with, everything has a consequence. Sometimes positive, sometimes negative, sometimes neutral, but everything has an outcome, right? Choices matter. Whether you tip a bartender or not, I take into account. Now, does it always matter in a big, grandiose way? No, not at all, right? But I like to keep things into account simply because maybe you don't see it, but I will, and then I'll notice it later, right? If you're going to stick into a town for a while and you're very normally strict on you buy the cheapest thing and you don't tip, then if at any point during that week you say, hey, I want to get some information from the bartender, you think he's going to be so willing to give you info? He's probably, now you may not know this, I may not tell you, but when you say, hey, I want to go to the bartender and get some, get some information, maybe he charges you 2 silver instead of 1. Now, you don't know that his normal charge is 1 silver, but I've taken into account that you've been kind of stingy, so he's going to charge you more. Now, if you've gone into town, you're spending your money, you're tipping well, And you do the same thing. Maybe he doesn't even charge you for the info. Maybe he's like, oh yeah, I got you, you know, or maybe he introduces you to someone instead of just telling you the information, right? There's layers to it. And so for me, I think that their choices should always matter to some extent, and that could be a neutral extent. I do have NPCs who literally will not react one way or the other, so their choices are essentially moot, but it's still within the framework of positive, negative, neutral outcomes. And I think that that matters. I think that instilling that in my players has made them more conscientious of their choices, but it also has made them more interacting with their choices. It's really made them think through what they want to do and what they're going to get out of it. All right, Hecate has another question. Have you ever made a PC that's basically you or your dream character, and have your players interact with them or fought them before? So, this is a weird question. So, I personally have never made like a human version, like the identical one-to-one, like me, Vortex, is in the game. But of course, I have made PCs and characters that are idealized versions of myself. And technically, my very first PC was the ideological version of how I saw myself as a fantasy hero. I was evil, but you know, as the fantasy hero of D&D, my very first character was in fact just that. It was what I, you know, idolized myself as in terms of that fantasy. Then that character became a god, and that god became what is now the ruler of High Point. Now the god took a different direction than I would have, and that my original character took, and that was for major reasons. But technically that original character was recreated here in High Point. So is there technically the closest version of a PC that I've made that is me to an extent? Yes, and they still do exist in High Point, but my players have yet to really interact with them. So they exist, but no one's actually gotten to it. But lore reasons is because the human version, or the mortal version of who my god Zenith was, and who Zenith decided to be as a god, are completely different. So in order to really make High Point what it is, Zenith knew that, you know, he couldn't ignore who he was and had great reverence for, you know, the mortal that made him, but also knew that High Point wasn't ready for them to be running rampant and free. So technically that version, my original PC, has been brought here in High Point, but has been essentially locked away since inception, and a series of events must happen before that character can be released. So that's just kind of a thing in the background of High Point, that my original character Dice is locked away and waiting to be released. And then when he does, see what he does when he finds out that he's in a new world. All right, well, I'll go about 15 more minutes if I don't get another stream of good questions, but I'll stay alive for 15 more minutes until we get some more. Let me know. I am really enjoying this. So we've had some great questions. Let me know. Again, this guys could be anything D&D related, about the stream, about our content, about me. Feel free to branch off into questions, but I'm loving the D&D questions. I am not, oh, weird. That took forever to update that. But yeah, I'm not upset with the D&D questions. You can keep them coming. I just don't want you to feel locked into only D&D questions. Oh, sweet. We got a follower. Thank you. Shiogorath followed us. I appreciate that. I don't think they're watching anymore, but that was cool. Oh, what's this? I love that nobody, like, I swear to God, there was only like maybe a handful of people who understood that my April 1st TikTok post was an April Fool's joke. I really don't. It's so funny to realize that so many people do not realize that that was an April Fool's joke. But hey, you know what? It's TikTok. What can I expect? Does your world's magic come from the same origin or from the natural world itself? And if so, how does that interact with elements in your world? That's a phenomenal question. Wow. So I have, once again, I have an entire stream about this, Hecate. If you really want to understand the full depth of High Point magic, I can send you the VOD link, because I did a deep dive. It's actually, that entire whiteboard has been filled. That's all my, that's most of my magic system. Like, that entire whiteboard behind me is High Point's magic system. And I wrote that like 2 years ago in a live stream. That's been up there for like 2 years since that live stream. And it literally breaks down my magic. But so to answer your question in a nutshell, magic, it's a complicated way of asking this. So the summarized version. So magic itself, again, I follow Forgotten Realms, so magic and the weave are very much intertwined with High Point in terms of how to use magic. The weave is there in order to grant the access to the flow of energy that is magic. Now, the magical flows do change. So while the weave is still important to accessing magic, not all magic is necessarily from the same source. So the weave does not necessarily have anything to do with divine magic. It has to do with more natural magic. So the weave is what lets wizards use magic, but it has nothing to do with clerics using magic. It has nothing to do with paladins using magic. And the same thing when it comes to like druids and natural magic. The weave assists with the intensity of the abilities, but not necessarily the formation. So druids technically would still exist without the weave, but it would not be as refined. I hope that makes sense. So druids would still have power, but it would not be as refined or as intense and as focused as it is with the weave. Same thing. Like, you know, there's plenty of things. Warlocks would not be affected if there was no weave, because that is a different type of situation. So for the most part, most magic does come from the same location, but there are grants of magic that bypass the need for the weave. But other than that, most magic that you would think of does come from essentially the same source for the weave. And then how it interacts with elements, again, I default to Forgotten Realms, so every main element has its own plane of existence. Certain secondary elements have their own plane. Other elements are only created by the combination thereof. And the weave is also what allows all of those to interact and mingle the way that it does, right? Like, it, you know, it allows for portals to be opened. It allows for the melding of the different dimensions to touch in order for, you know, you to pull fire from the elemental plane of fire in order to cast magic. So yes, it's a little bit more complicated, but for the most part, yes, it's all the same location, but there are a few caveats and a few outliers. So, but again, if you're interested, I would be happy to send you the whole VOD, because if you want to know how magic works, it's all on this whiteboard, and it's like a 3-hour explanation. Do the deities control that or use it as a base for their divine powers? So Mystara is still responsible for the weave. She is still the embodiment of, and just can't get around that. Now, there are some deities that, due to their spheres of influence, do require a good relationship with Mystara and do require a bit of understanding in that, because their sphere of influence is directly related to magic and to the essence of the weave. But there are other gods that don't interline, or like their spheres of influence don't really overlap or intertwine at all with the basis of magic. So there's no real need for them to have that relationship or have that they don't really have any like connection to the need for the weave. So a deity's power themselves is not directly dependent upon the weave, but if their sphere of influence is directly affected or directly intertwined with the use of magic or with the magic and the weave itself, then yes, there will be more or less a relationship that needs to be had for things to run smoothly. And if they're on bad terms, well, you know, maybe things don't run as smoothly on the god tier. But no, the deities themselves don't control the weave or the flow of magic. They have their own direct control of their own flow of magic. But if their sphere of influence overlaps with Mystara in any way, then they kind of both have a little bit of control over that influence and need to have a nice little balance, you know, between each other and their relationship. Yes, the weave is the Wi-Fi, not the data. Exactly. I hope you do. Sometimes I wonder if I have the words to explain the thoughts in my head sometimes, because again, almost like what, 13, almost 14 years of creating this realm, and it is sometimes difficult because I have concepts that I've thought of and thought through, but not all of the concepts have been put to words. So sometimes it's just one of those, I don't know if I'm going to be able to articulate this in a way that makes sense to others. But hey, that's all right. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes it's not meant for other people. Sometimes it's just meant for me to be consistent. Because that's what I've told Kage a lot about my method for building High Point, is that sometimes it's more about the scaffolding than it is about the building itself, because with High Point, not everything is going to be understood by the players or even discovered by the players, right? That's why it's not meant to be a publication. It's not meant to be known every detail from front to back so you can exploit everything. The idea is it's supposed to be an adventure, it's supposed to be an experience, but you are supposed to have expectations. You should be able to have a solid understanding and a good educated guess on what you can expect to happen. And that's where, for me, consistency is key. So there are some things that I have made decisions about in order to keep consistency, but it's never required me to put it into words, because it's only for my understanding in order to make the world work properly. But it is great to verbalize it and get people on the same page, because it is nice to know that what I'm thinking does make sense, and at least has a good understanding with my, with my players. Because the more my players understand it, the more they can benefit from it, right? The more that they can engage with the story, engage with the world, and get benefit from it by understanding how to interact. Would you or have you let your players destroy some in-world that's cornerstone of your world, such as a deity death, huge country or kingdom, and do you allow the ideas for it for your players? Absolutely. Again, my world is 100% open world. It is a living, breathing place. You can do anything there. This is not at all linear. I mean, again, it's like the way I try to like tell people is like, imagine the best open world game you've ever played, and then imagine adding all the things you wish you could do, and then there's still more than that. Because the idea is, again, I don't want a game that feels like, always expecting you to go over here, right? So, not every door is unlocked, but technically every door has something behind it, right? There is no building that doesn't have a purpose. There's no town that doesn't have a history. There's no individual that doesn't have a name. the point is it will grow the more you interact with it, and it will react to you. So yes, if you want some exact examples, Vixie is coming up to a major turning point right now, where she's directly responsible for the potentially opening of a very, very ancient vault that has items and things in it that have been around since basically before the current iteration of High Point, like the mortal iteration. So there are things in there that are so powerful, they should no longer exist, but they're too powerful to destroy, so they were locked away. So she technically holds the key. She knows it. She holds the key to this vault, and she's directly involved in a situation where her decisions now will decide whether or not the vault gets opened. And that will change everything. Like, that will absolutely, this is not just like a story, like, you know, oh, it sounds big. I mean, if that vault opens, the entire history and the entire direction of High Point will 100% change. There is no doubt about that. Not only is there something inside of it that no one wants to get out, but there's just a bunch of items in there that no one should ever get their hands on. And if this vault gets opened, no one knows what's going to come out. So that's a big deal. She also pissed off a general from one of the basically like one of the top three thieving guilds, the Assassin's Guild. One of their generals she pissed off, and that was kind of his last straw. So he flipped his shit and basically is now going on a murderous rampage across the entire continent. So to become a lich, because he just said, well, that was my last straw, so he's going to full lichdom. So she caused that to happen. Let's see. They didn't really cause it to happen, but they were involved in one of the most safest locations in like the Tri-Kingdom area. That got breached and has, you know, lost all of its reputation. She was directly involved in that. Let's see, what else? Two of my players released a god that was trapped and had been trapped for, I haven't even done the calculation yet, but they released that god directly by their own hand. And they're releasing more as they continue. So that's happening. And they are changing the way, because right now in that particular campaign, there were a full section of gods that were basically taken over. There was a coup happened, and a bunch of them were taken over and banished, and a bunch of different gods took their place and changed a whole bunch of the lore, changed their names, and tried to rewrite history. And that group is now unleashing some of those gods that were imprisoned. And now that information has started to, like, the truth has started to surface, and that will forever change High Point, because these are, as far as everyone else is concerned, as far as most people are concerned, these are main gods. And this group is starting to uncover that these are just basically false gods in their place. So they're doing that as well. Yeah, I mean, so it is absolutely 100% possible for them to do whatever they want. They can kill NPCs of importance. They can destroy kingdoms. They can do technically anything they want, as if they can pull it off, and the world will respond. I do not set any of those kind of limitations on them, just because to me that's the whole point, right? They are in this place, and if they can pull it off, then they can pull it off. So yeah, there's everything from, you know, the vaults to gods to major NPCs that they are directly interacting with and making choices over. Everything like that will change it. And again, every one of my players is in the same setting, right? So something that one player does have ripple effects for other players. Another one of my players decided randomly on a solo mission, they were just solo gaming with me. They went to this random place in a kingdom and wanted to mess with diseases. So they specifically sought out an area that had some good cattle, and they sat down there for a while, and for just months they were just messing with different diseases and using the cattle for it. And then eventually they just said, I want to leave. I don't want to do this anymore. So they left. And like mid-project, they just said, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, little did they know that, diseases wasn't going to stop just because they left. So little did they know, because they never asked where they went. They just wanted to find the best place for it. They just happened to land in cattle country for the entire kingdom. So they spent some time literally developing brand new diseases that have never been, seen before in the middle of cattle country, and then they just left. Well, the diseases ran rampant. They took over. The cattle were absolutely devastated, to the point at which the entire kingdom suffered. Not only did the cattle farms in that entire valley basically get abandoned and went for the most part, it was like for like a year, it was basically uninhabitable because the disease would pretty much get anybody who went through there. It took several waves of clerics and paladins to cleanse the place. But then the neighboring areas, the neighboring towns started to wilt and die off, and the entire kingdom suffered. Basically, their entire meat production came to a halt, and that caused a bunch of diplomatic shifts because then they had to start making deals with neighboring kingdoms for subsidies, and it actually really tilted the power away from them, not because they were major cattle producers, but they were relatively self-sufficient, and now they're not. So while they were pretty much the leading kingdom in the Tri-Kingdom area, and they were pretty much like the gold standard of kingdoms, this one thing this one player did has literally ruined their reputation to the point that they're not the worst, but they're no longer top dog anymore, simply because that one economic shift, that one diplomatic shift where they had to become reliant on someone else, it wasn't just a weakness, but it was just a shift in perception. Everyone realized that they are no longer self-sufficient, and just this idea that this kingdom that has always stood on its own and been the, basically the gold standard has now shown a weakness. They're just like everyone else. They need help and can't do everything. So that kind of thing takes a toll on politics, and it takes a toll on diplomacy. So deals don't get made as easy. Some people feel more emboldened. Borders start to become more chaotic and more aggressive. But that had nothing to do with what they wanted. They literally got a group of new powers and wanted to test it out, sat down for a couple gaming sessions, played with it, and got bored, and then they left. But I'm not going to let that go. I'm not going to say, oh, well, because you left, diseases are gone. No, you fucked with diseases, you fucked with the cattle, and it ran rampant. What did you want me to do? And I had them do rolls to figure out how deadly, how infectious. And yeah, they made rolls to the point to where you made a disease that it didn't hurt many people. Like, it did hurt people, but it wasn't to the point to where it killed the kingdom, but it was enough to where you ruined an entire industry just because you went and decided to fuck with the one stable crop that they had, and the entire industry's ruined, and that entire kingdom has suffered for it. So yes, 100%. Players can affect the entirety of the world with small, tiny little things. And it doesn't have to be intentional. They don't need, and I didn't do that to punish the player. In fact, I'm not even sure that player, like the player, the individual, the real human being, I'm not even sure that player actually even knows of or understands the significance of the fallout of what they did. Like 100%, I think they gave up on it and just assumed that it would just be, oh, okay, a couple cows got disease. I have no idea if they even have a clue that I took that into account. And it doesn't help that Dixie did a time jump, so I was able to go several years in the future and plan out exactly what happened to that kingdom. So yeah, it's just one of those things. I don't do it for the player sometimes. I do it because, again, some of the choices that I make, some of the rules that I follow are to ensure that I as a DM remain consistent. So even though my player doesn't know that all this fallout happened, by doing so, I remain consistent. And if it ever comes back on them, that storyline comes full circle. And then they'll be able to see at some point, oh, that was me? So there's ways that I try to keep it all in the loop, and then eventually get to a point to where, okay, this is going to come full circle, or at least if at any time I get challenged, I can walk through these things, and all my players have done that at some point where they challenge me, not in a bad way, but they honestly challenge the story, and then I will backtrack every detail to show them this is exactly what led up, your choices led to this, and they're usually fine with that. Like, they usually don't argue too much, because it's not so much that, I'm like, well, you're wrong and you have to deal with it, but it's very much a, do you remember doing this? Do you remember doing this? Well, this was the fallout of that. And then this happened. And then if you remember this detail, and then they kind of piece it together and go, oh, so I was responsible for that. And be like, yeah, you kind of were. But again, I can't do that if I don't remain consistent in the way that I tell my story. And if I don't remain consistent in the way that the world reacts to things. So again, when it comes down to it, everything is interactable. And I take, again, what I was saying earlier, everything my players do, from who they attack, how they talk to NPCs, the things they do, sometimes the impact is very small. But as long as I make those impacts happen in the background, my story stays consistent, my players' experience stays consistent, and when they do things, they can expect the world will react to them, right? Because again, it just kind of sucks that if you want to have a party, right, of 6 people, and you want to have that one player who wants to roleplay being the jackass, but it never matters that they're the jackass, then what's the point of them being that other than they're doing that in real life to annoy the other players, right? But if in game, that bites them in the ass every now and again. Not only can that lead to character development, but it's also reality. Your character is like that, so your character is going to get singled out for acting that way. And sometimes they might run into an asshole NPC who respects it and goes, actually, I don't like any of you, but that asshole, he's the one I trust. And there might be other times where you're constantly screwing the party over because you're saying the wrong thing. But that's part of the game. If that's the character you want to play, DMs shouldn't be withholding their punches to push the story along. But players also need to understand there's a difference between being an asshole and derailing the game, right? And I think there's just a fine line with that, but there has to be good consequences, and to make consequences feel right, they have to be consistent. You have to be balanced and consistent. And if you don't, that's when players push their boundaries. But if you make your limits and your boundaries very clear and you stick to them and you have those consequences, both positive, negative, and neutral, your players start to, I don't want to say fall in line per se, but they start to play within those boundaries and then use them to their advantage. And I think that that's the encouragement that I try to do, is not tell my players what they can't do, but recognize, or let them recognize, things will respond to you. So it's not about whether what you did was right or wrong. It's how did you do it and how do you expect things to respond in kind. So if you can pull it off and no one knows about it, hey, that's awesome. Good for you. But if you do something dumb, like if you're talking to, the most arrogant, self-absorbed king, and you try to do a charisma check and convince him that you guys are really cool and he should be, really charitable, I don't care what you roll. He's not going to acquiesce to that. But the difference is if you roll a 1, he might have you beheaded for insulting him. And if you roll an at 20, he might laugh and let you go. And in fact, he might give you something as a kickback because, you know what? No one's ever stood up to him like that and was so bold, right? But that's the difference between a nat 1 and a nat 20 that I think a lot of people don't recognize. Is, again, a nat 20 is just the most successful. It's a guaranteed success as the most successful thing that could have happened. But that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get what you want. And so making sure that consequences are there is I think where a lot of DMs, I don't want to say fail, but they come short in terms of how to get your players to roleplay and how to get your character or your players to feel the impact of their choices. Is you really have to make consequences run the range of positive, negative, and neutral. So your players begin to learn that their actions will have a response, and then they will start to play with those responses, not with the boundaries. I hope that in words makes more sense, right? But if you put boundaries out there, players are going to push it, right? Players are going to find your limits and they're going to push their boundaries. But if there are consequences along with those, they're more likely to engage with the consequences, not the boundaries. And to me, that's where I want my players. I want my players engaging with things that they try to do to see what consequences they'll get, not how far will I let them go. And that's a key difference. It's not how far will I let them go, it's how far are they willing to accept the consequences. And that mind shift as a DM is, in my opinion, one of the biggest power plays, is when you get your players to start thinking and engaging with the fallout of their choice and not whether or not you'll allow it. That right there, to me, is a very big difference in the type of gameplay you're going to get with your players and the party. So work on that. Work on trying to get them to engage with the outcomes, not whether or not they're even allowed to attempt it. And I think you'll get a much different interaction with them, because at that point they're engaging with the universe, they're engaging with the world, they're engaging with the story and the actions that they're taking. Not, well, I want this to be accomplished, so how far will you let me go with it? That's not the right answer, because then you're just playing for what you expect to happen and not for what can happen or what will happen. And to me, that's really the difference in having a strong story-based game versus a mechanically run game. Fantastic questions. Thank you so much for that. Oh my god, a mutated cow that eats people instead of grass. That's terrifying. Oh, all right. Well, this has been successful. We are a little over 2 hours in. We've had a lot of great questions. Chat and viewership is kind of dying out. I think I'm probably gonna at least pop off a TikTok. So if I have the numbers wrong and there is anybody still on TikTok watching, I appreciate you guys showing up. Thank you for all the questions. We're going to end the live stream there, but it was fun. We'll be doing this a lot more. Now that I know I can do both at the same time, I'm probably going to try and stream on TikTok a lot more. We might at least do our reviews. If I can get, if I can figure out how to show what we're talking about, I might do reviews on Fridays or on Mondays. And if not, I'll pop back on Fridays and we'll just do the podcasting stuff. But again, if you're on TikTok, thank you. I appreciate it so much. But we're going to shut TikTok down for now. And then we'll be ended up here soon anyway. But again, thank you all so much for joining us, and we will see you guys soon. End that live stream. Okay, that was pretty good. We got 164 views, 1.2 thousand likes. Now that must be total. That's probably not. Viewers who commented 6 and 2 gifters. No, that was, wow. So I got 1.2 thousand likes and 164 views just on this one. That's not bad. Let's see, we got some gifts and some promotions. I made 42 cents. Ooh, look at, yeah, we made 42 cents, everybody. That's not as much as I make on Twitch, but it's not far off. Let's see. Cool. Well, that was fun. We'll definitely have to do some more TikTok later, but we'll shut that one down. All right. But yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. I appreciate all of you for showing up. I thank you for all of the questions. It has been a phenomenal AMA. I think better than last time. I think we had more questions this AMA than last time. So I really appreciate that. I'm excited to celebrate 3 years. It is coming up on Tuesday. We will have a normally scheduled review on Monday. So Kage will be back on Monday. We'll do another review. I think Hecate, I think we might have one of yours coming up. But check with Kage. He's back on Sunday. So if he doesn't update the schedule by like Sunday midday, go ahead and ping him on Discord. But other than that, we will be back on Monday for a review. Friday, we will be doing Goku, pop culture build for Goku. And then next Saturday, we'll be doing the subathon for our 3rd year. So tune in for that. We'll just do kind of a variety of things. And then from there, we'll be doing everything like normal. Just doing it. All right, my friends, I appreciate everybody for showing up. I think I'm going to log off, and since it's Friday, I might try to go play some video games. It's been a minute, but I don't know. Video games have not been popping off on stream, so I don't think it would be worth playing video games on stream, but I might go play some Arc Raiders for a bit, chill out, and try to enjoy my weekend. Anyway, y'all, thank you again. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys had a great week. I hope you have a fantastic weekend ahead of you. But that's going to be me for tonight, and we'll be back on Monday. Cheers.